Welcome to the No Budget Indie Film Cast, where we dip into the independent film universe to highlight those little films that you might not have heard about elsewhere. We agree with our panel, or will our panel agree with each other? Tune in to find out. I am Milo Dennison, and with me, as always, is Claire Milan.
Hello.
And Cathal Feeney.
Hello.
All right, Cathal, what did we watch this week?
This week we watched a documentary called The Story of Film and Odyssey, which is a 15-episode, 900-minute documentary written, directed, and narrated by Mark Cousins, who is a Northern Ireland film critic. It's actually around a while now. It's from about 2011. And to show the dedication that the No Budget team have to this show, we watched the first episode. So, as the first episode, as you might imagine, it sort of introduces the series and then gives a little overview of what it's going to cover, and then goes back to the beginning of the cinema. It doesn't just solely concentrate in the beginning; it kind of flits back and forth. So if they show something that was used in the early days and that show a different example from a modern film, how it was incorporated. So it starts off with the technical development of film with the Lumiere brothers and Thomas Edison, and then kind of moves on to sort of the creative aspect in terms of writing, directing, the use of light and the different cinematic techniques. And I suppose it's sort of going to bring us up sort of to the middle of the 1920s, I guess. It's very interesting, I thought, for anybody who is a film buff or not. It's like everybody likes cinema, so there's quite a lot there for everybody to enjoy. I found the narration itself a bit soporific, it was almost like you were being hypnotized, but it wasn't, I suppose, that bad. The one thing I found quite interesting in this particular episode was a film critic called Carrie Beecham, and she talked about the early days of Hollywood, and she said that it was dominated by women, Jews, and immigrants, because she says that they weren't allowed into other professions, and they were highly motivated, highly creative. And 50% of all film scripts written before 1925 were written by women. And there was a female scriptwriter called Frances Marion, who she was the highest paid scriptwriter from 1915 to 1935, and she was the first to win 2 Oscars. But then when sort of more money came into it, and Wall Street and the jobs became higher paid, the men took the jobs, the bastards. So I thought, but that's the sort of the detail it goes into. Yeah. So then what you guys thought?
It's quite interesting because I made a silent film a while back, and I started delving into this era, and there's so much of it I wasn't aware of, and so much of it most of us aren't aware of. And the fact I didn't know that Hollywood was run by women in the very early stages, or there was a huge percentage of women that have been wiped out of film history. And even a lot of editors were women. And to think that 50% of scripts were written by women in the early days, it just shows you. And it's something I'm not aware of. And some of these women, they're kind of hidden in the background. And sometimes they put kind of male names in front of it. And it's something that that should be acknowledged, because I think back in the early days, they used to have to stitch up for editing, and women had smaller hands, So but then when they moved on, and as you said, when money came into it, men came in and took over, it was a really interesting documentary. And I just thinking, imagine back then you've never seen a moving image, and that they showed this image of a train. And I think I remember I remember when I was very young, I went to Disneyland in Florida, and going there with the 3D glasses and going into this thing and seeing like things come out at you. And it was the first time ever I saw that, and just being so mesmerized by it. So you can imagine when they're sitting there and they see this train coming along, they thought the train was going to come out at them.
Yeah.
So it must have been like, wow, it must have been, a whole experience. And how quickly film moved on from the very early stages. It was like 20 years until they had this like old black and white massive production, and it just shows you how quickly it moved on from where it started. I thought it was an absolutely fascinating thing. And they talked about this woman as well called Florence Lawrence, which is an unusual name. She was the first Hollywood first star, big star, but actress, and she actually killed herself with ant poison. but she was the first star, and there's all these hidden people that we don't know about, and that I think as filmmakers ourselves, I think we nearly have a duty to go back and look at what we're doing today, and even the things where we edit and the different cuts. And I thought it was really fascinating, and luckily, well, not luckily, but it'd be interesting to watch other episodes. But the one thing I found so hard, and I agree with you, Carl, and I'm sorry to say this, but the narration was just, I was like, oh God, we absolutely love film, obviously, all of us, and I wanted to stick with the story and find out about these fascinating things. But the narration, oh my God, it was so hard. It was the rhythms. It was kind of rhythms of the way he spoke was a bit hypnotic. There was no change in the rhythms. If he got someone else to narrate it, because everything is there. Mm-hmm. I couldn't stick through 9 episodes of that. I'm really sorry, but it was just the narration just killed me. I had to take a break. I'm sorry to say that. I feel awful saying that, but it was the pacing of the narration was just too much. And but the things it was telling was absolutely fascinating. So I found it really, really interesting. And I'm going to go back and look at other things and explore the things in the earlier side of filmmaking that I'm not aware of, because I think it's so good to see these things and see where stuff came from. So, yeah.
I have to disagree with both of you. I loved the narration. What I liked about it too is because his pacing and style is very different from what you generally hear in documentary narration and voiceover work. Yeah. And so it was unique and it had a kind of a style to it that I'm like, I really did like the narration. Maybe you guys don't like it because you're Irish and you gotta hate on his accent.
No, Scottish and Irish. We're all one, But yeah, that's interesting.
Yeah. No, I'm just kidding. But I did. I liked his accent or his narration, his style.
No, I mean, I got used to it because the content was so good like that. Yeah, that I was able to overcome it. Yeah, it wasn't completely objectionable.
Yeah, and it's interesting because there's a certain documentary voice, that we're used to because watching all of the documentaries, So that's what probably jarred at first, like, oh God, this is not a documentary voice at all. But obviously, some people will love it.
Yeah. Interesting thing about Florence Lawrence, just an FYI here, is her grave site was unlabeled, like it didn't have her name, was just a blank thing until I want to say like the mid 90s. I want to say like 95 or something like that. And then somebody actually paid to get a proper thing put on her grave that actually had her name and dates on it. And it has her date of birth wrong because she was of that era where you often kind of make yourself younger and stuff. So it has her birthday wrong on it.
Because why did she kill herself? Was there, what's this?
She was injured in working on a film and I think scarred wise. And so she had a lot of injuries. So she was in a lot of pain. She wasn't getting a lot of work because she, partially aged out, partially because of the injuries and stuff like that. So she was in pain and not working and probably just depressed from all of it.
Oh, wow.
Actually, do you know what's interesting? As I was, Woody Allen has a film where there was it the Blue Rose of Cairo, I think it's called. But the way where
I Rode of Cairo.
What's it called?
The Purple Rose of Cairo.
Purple.
Blue and purple are close.
Blue Roads of Cairo, a totally different film. No, Purple
Well,
Roads
I
of
was thinking
Cairo.
High Road to China for some reason. I mixed two films there. I just said High Road to Cairo.
But you know the way in the Purple Rose of Cairo, the character goes into the screen and comes out and goes in. But where did he get the inspiration from?
Buster Keaton.
Buster Keaton. And I realized after watching this, Woody Allen was stealing in a good way, because we all take from each other. Like, you know, if you go back in history, you'll find, you know, people steal from each other. But he took it definitely from Buster Keaton.
And I thought that was very funny. I just like to see that, because he was in the film and then the scene would change and he wouldn't realize the scene would change, and he'd go to sit down and his chair
is so clever.
Yeah.
And one time the scene changed and he was inside of a cliff and then he was in the middle of the road, and it was just only Buster Keaton could do that.
Yeah,
but it was interesting.
Yeah, it's amazing too, and doing it in that era of on film and the way films were made. Like now it's much easier to do that type of stuff. But back then it's fantastic. And his flair and style with the way he reacted to the change.
There was so much creativity went into making those films, like that. The shooting those scenes, like the one there, and especially the action ones with the likes of Buster Keaton and who else? Harold Lloyd, maybe Charlie Chaplin. So you know, that's sort of the train coming along and all that kind of stuff. It must have been a huge amount of money went into it too, of course.
Yeah, and remember, they were actors, directors, writers, producers. Charlie Chaplin was everything. I think Buster Keaton was as well. They were literally everything. Yeah.
Well, he was. I don't know. I'm not sure about the rest of them. Maybe. Yeah. And also there was mentioned a female, another female. She was French. Alice Guy Blanchet, who was she started out as a secretary working in this company in France somewhere, and then they let her play around with the equipment after she finished her secretarial duties, and then she became a director and very famous. The first studio boss, the first female director, one of the first. I think she was the first. One of the first directors, actually. And she was one of the first people to introduce the idea of a film arc, a story arc into film. So it is another.
There you go. And these things have to be promoted, I think, because I didn't realize, and I'm guilty of it, like how it's so inspiring as well when you look back and see the way women were so prominent. You know, and it's really amazing, and something that I think every filmmaker should be aware of.
Man, such bastards.
I know, aren't they? When they realize there was money involved.
Yeah, women start it up and men take it away.
Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, that's true. Yeah, well, there's no money and no budget, so you know
That's right. That's what we're all about.
Yeah.
But you know
we're here for the love of the film.
Yeah,
right?
But I wonder, like, does it make us lazier nowadays that we have so much access to just film stuff? Because back then they probably had to think about it because everything was so expensive, even until 20, 30 years ago. Like, it wouldn't have been like today where you just do a million takes. So it's quite interesting. Are we lazier with stuff, or does it mean that we can actually create more stuff? So it depends. Experiment. Don't know.
I think you could argue both points on that one, actually. I mean, yeah. All right. Well, let's rate it. Claire?
So for me, it was fascinating, a great insight. And I really want to look up some of these people mentioned, but the narration just jarred so much at me. I find it really hard to watch because of that reason, which I feel terrible saying it, but I still will give it 3 stars.
I really enjoyed it. I'm a history of film nerd anyways. And I thought his narration was fantastic. So, and the whole series, I was telling you guys before we started recording, is I've seen other episodes in the series, and I'm gonna go 5 stars as documentaries about the history of film goes. I think it's a winner.
Yeah. Well, taking into account this is the first episode of 15. I'm sure like the standard is going to be just as high and just as interesting. You know what? I'm going to give it 4.5. I'm going to drop that little half for
I'm
the
a bit guilty now.
for the narration. And I feel
should give it
you know,
more.
that's so petty, but
Yeah.
yeah, I don't mind the style, like the pacing. It was just God.
Poor guy. I'm trying to remember the guy's name that made the
Mark
film.
Cousins. Mark
I
Cousins.
feel guilty now.
Yeah. Jeez,
Yeah.
Mark Cousins. He's gonna watch our review and be like, "Screw you guys! I sound
Sorry.
fantastic."
Yeah.
Yeah, he's made a bunch of documentaries as well.
Yeah,
too,
no, he's
that-
really, really, really good guy. And an actual fact, well, you can do your outro. I just no, I was just going to say, like, the Oscars, you know, were announced, the nominations, and you probably aren't aware of this, Moyle, like, but this happens every year. That whenever there's an Irish person nominated, they become British. Like, so there was 2 Irish people nominated: Jessie Buckley, who's from Cork, or not from Cork, from Kerry, and Kieran Hines, who's okay, he's from Northern Ireland. So anyway, they were like, oh, you know, the Brits did well.
Yeah.
And he was actually Mark Cousins.
Neither one's actually British.
Yeah. And Mark Cousins, like, I saw him on Twitter. Somebody, like, he commented on a comment on somebody else's comment, you know. And I saw the name. What's the guy who did that documentary? So he said, yeah, and he was complaining about it too. So you know, maybe I should bump him up a half point for that. But
oh well.
Yeah.
Well, folks, if you want to check out the documentary and let us know what you think, you can do that by leaving us a comment or reaching out to us on social media at No Budget Show. You can let us know what you think of our show via a comment or a review, or if you like it, tell your friends so we can get a bigger audience. And with that, we'll say stay tuned to see what we are watching next week. Goodbye.
Bye.
But